Hi everyone and welcome to this week's Wallsend history story. This week is video number 4 in the series about Wallsend public houses. I hope you will enjoy it. As said previously, this isn't a full history of each pub or club as the case may be in this video. It's a basic history which might also include a few little news articles about things that happened there in the past or things connected to them. There will be more details about some pubs than others, as some just don't seem to have very much information available, and others, like the first one in this video, have quite a lot. But I hope that you will still enjoy it and still find it interesting. The first pub this week is the Miners on Station Road. Some of you may be aware that when first built, this was actually the Wallsend G Pit and the Rise and Sun Colliery's Welfare Institute. Opened in November of 1925, the institute had cost around £9,000 to build. This would be around £700,000 in today's money. The opening ceremony was performed by Mr. Embleton, a director of the Wallsend and Howdon Coal Company, and also at the opening was Alderman W. Weir. Mr. Embleton, who had performed the official opening, had been presented with a silver key as a memento of the occasion. This is the first silver key I have heard of, as previously they had all been gold keys. During his speech, he had actually talked of how he had gone down the mines when just a boy of 7 years of age, and it was felt that at the opening there were no doubt many miners present who had started their working life at a similar age. But by 1925, boys had to be 14 years or older to work in the collieries. Miners still worked long hours and worked hard, so they had wanted somewhere nice for them to be able to socialise and relax. It was stated that at the opening that the miners' wives should be allowed to use the hall upstairs in the institute, which had been the plan from the beginning. However, there was no mention of them being able to use any of the rooms downstairs. It was said that the hall was 70 foot long by 40 foot wide, with space to accommodate up to 500 people. It had a stage with dressing rooms and a servant area where food would be sent up from the kitchen by means of what I assume to be a dumb waiter. The floor had been especially designed with springs to make it good for dancing. The ground floor had a library, a reading room, a kitchen, 3 committee rooms, and a large room with space for 3 billiard tables. There was also an area where the caretaker would live, and at the front entrance there were men's and women's toilets on either side of the building. The building was designed by architects Cause, Steel and Cause of Sunderland, and the builder had been Mr. Lumsden of Newcastle. It was hoped that the building would be well used by the miners and their wives for many years to come. And I think that it is fair to say that it was well used. I do know that in 1930, however, a theatre licence was refused, as it was stated by the police that the fire and sanitary arrangements were not good enough. I did try to find a follow-up article to see what happened, but I wasn't able to find anything, which is a shame, as it would have been nice to know if they did make the changes to get the licence granted, as was often the case. In later years, it became known as just the Rise and Sun Social Club, and it was certainly still known by that name in the early 80s. A little later, it became known as Super Snooker, which I do remember quite well, as some of my family used to go there to play, well, snooker, surprisingly enough. When Super Snooker closed, the building became known simply as the Miners. However, I do have to say that from things I have read over the years, the building was probably known as the Miners long before that name was actually put above the door. I've always thought that it was quite an impressive looking building. From the station road end, I thought it had a bit of a castle look about it, but of course that might just be me. I have been in the miners a few times over the years, and I know how bouncy the floor is upstairs. I've also been in with friends when they played snooker, but I only watched as snooker really isn't my kind of thing. I am sure many Wallsenders will remember going to the miners, or whatever name you knew it as, for dances, kids' Christmas parties, to watch films, to play snooker, or to just sit and have a quiet drink. And I could be completely wrong, but I do believe that Gary Wilson used to play in the miners when it was Super Snooker. That could be totally wrong, so don't quote me, or if you're listening and you know, do let me know if that's right. The miners is still open and still trading in 2023. The next pub, although I should really say club, that I am going to talk about is the Wallsend Social Club on Sycamore Street. Now, of course, many Wallsenders will know that this club has a somewhat interesting nickname, which I am not going to use here. But it would appear that the name came from the fact that right outside the entrance to the club were some underground men's toilets. So I am hoping some of you, those of you who don't know, can guess the name if I simply say that it started with a P. The toilets were closed and filled in, with them being underground toilets, many years ago, but the name does still seem to have stuck with the club. The club itself was probably built in around 1900 to 1901, and unlike the miners, as it was originally built as a club, there doesn't really seem to have been any grand opening ceremony for the building. And there's also not a massive amount of history about it either, but I did find a couple of interesting, well, I hope they're interesting, little stories about it. In early 1904, it was reported that members of the club had for quite some time been sending magazines and newspapers to the Infectious Diseases Hospital for the use of the patients, and the town clerk had sent thanks on behalf of the patients. At that particular time, smallpox had been quite bad in the area. However, the last Wallsend patient had been discharged in December of 1903. A little later in 1904, and it wasn't quite such good news. In November, the club found themselves in court on a charge stating that it was not being conducted in good faith as a club, and that there was frequent drunkenness allowed on the premises. The then secretary of the club, Mr. Carty, was able to adjourn the case on the grounds that they did not yet have a solicitor. However, in the end, they couldn't afford one, and the case went ahead a week later. Mr. Carty was new to the job and hoped that he would be given it time to sort things out. However, this was not the case. Several cases of drunkenness were reported by the police, and the magistrates ordered that the club was to be closed for 12 months and also fined 15 shillings and costs. The Wallsend Social Club is still open today and is still trading as a club. I am sure that many Wallsenders will have used this club at some point in time, but I have definitely never been inside of it at all. The final pub that I am talking about this week is again actually a club, and that is the RAOB Club, or to make it easier for me, the Buffs Club. This was one where I have really struggled to find anything interesting in any of the newspapers about it at all. I have to say that I believe the name is possibly stopping me from finding anything, as it's hard to decide what name to put into the search. So sadly, the history for it is a bit basic. But I didn't want to leave it out, as I am slowly trying to cover all of the pubs and clubs, even those with very little history about them, as they are all still part of the history of Wallsend. So if anyone has any interesting stories or details about the Buffs Club, please do let me know. The building was possibly built in early 1900s, and I believe that there was a building of some sort on the site before it became a brick building. It was quite common for wooden buildings or tin huts to be used before brick buildings were erected. Sometimes this was just because people were not sure how popular something would be, and other times it would be because the cost to build would need to be raised, so a temporary cheaper building would be used first. And I am trying to be kind here, but the entrance on Warwick Road is probably one of the most boring looking buildings in Wallsend when it comes to pubs and clubs. But I doubt very much that the clubs were ever built with beauty in mind. They were just built for purpose. The other side of the building does look a little nicer, perhaps because the windows are a bit bigger on that side. The Royal Order of the Buffaloes was founded in 1822 in London and is said to be one of the largest fraternal movements in the United Kingdom. This is of course where the Buffs Club name comes from. And that really is about all that I can tell you about the club. But then I did say that the info was quite basic. It is still open in 2023 and is still trading as a club. And I am sure that a few Wallsenders will have been in here over the years. I know that some of my family have been members, but again it's another one that I have definitely never been in. I do hope that you have found this video interesting, even though the last two clubs do not have much history about them. And I thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again very soon.